Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Pete, stream or skip. How are you today?
I am great, Ethan. How are you?
I'm good. So this week, your assignment was the show Station 11 on HBO Max.
That's
and
right.
My assignment, that's a pretty good title, by the way. My assignment was the very wordy The Man in the High Castle on Amazon Prime. You want to kick us off and tell us what is Station 11?
Absolutely.
Firefighting or space?
So neither.
No.
Neither. Yeah. Twist. Big twist. I thought it was going to be about some kind of like remote outpost in the Antarctic. Not at all.
Huh.
So Station 11 reminds me a little bit of Nine Perfect Strangers.
Really?
Yeah, in the sense that it's a mini-series. It's based on a book. And it is one of the few shows which cannot be accurately judged based only on the first two episodes. It's just tough. If you watched it just on the base of the first two episodes, it wode be a must subscribe. Because
really?
It starts off super strong with an incredible mystery.
Huh?
So if you had asked me last week after, Monday when I watched the first two episodes, I would have said, no, stop everything you're doing. Go watch Station 11 on HBO Max.
But we judge on the season, apparently, not just on two episodes, right?
So exactly. So normally we judge only on two episodes.
Yeah.
And when the show is this strong, you're just like, oh, well, I have to watch the rest of it. It's happened a couple of times. And then I immediately send you a message and say it. But this time I caught myself and said that I wanted
send
to
me a message. Yeah.
Exactly. But this time I wanted to catch myself and, see it. Let me just go into it. So the show is set between 2020 and 2040.
Okay.
It starts off in 2020 about a flu pandemic.
Okay.
And we learn that there's some kind of outbreak going on around the world. The main character, or one of the main characters in the show, finds out about it before anyone else because his sister works at a hospital. We see him go shopping. He buys $10,000 worth of groceries. And, he holds up in an apartment with his family and with this
How many groceries do you get for $10,000?
Exactly. It's crazy. I saw the number. I had to do a double take to see if that was a real number. I thought it was 900, but no, it was 9,000.
Huh.
And I have to say, it is quite possibly the start, especially episode 1 and 2, absolutely terrifying to watch.
Really?
It's genuinely shocking and terrifying in the sense that shocking because it's also terrifying because this is also something we as a society has gone through. Shocking in the sense that, of course, it's fictional, so they go a little bit further. They talk, you see violence, you see a lot of you see the negative sides of the COVID pandemic brought up on screen, right?
Yeah.
So you have a bunch of deniers, you have a bunch of like this.
Was this made before or after the COVID pandemic?
I think during.
Oh.
I think it was filmed during, but I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that.
Okay.
But the thing that got me hooked was because at the end of that very first episode, we do a time jump 20 years, and we see that little girl who was in the first episode in the beginning, who's like an 11 or an 8-year-old girl. She's now almost 30 years old.
Okay.
And it's a time jump. And she's reading a comic book called Station 11.
Okay.
So I thought, oh man, this is going to be a time travel thing. There's going to be, because the comic book, I just thought there was a lot of elements in it. But it's not any of that. Basically, the show is, it's so hard to describe, but the show flits back and forth between the present and the past. And we learn that basically society is completely broken down in these 20 years in America. The show is not set in any major city, by the way.
Yeah.
I think they very wisely made it like a fictional city in the middle of America. The show centers on the little girl, who obviously is now an adult. Her name is Kristen in the show. And she was an actor as a child in a production of King Lear. In the future, she becomes a part of this traveling group of Shakespearean actors and performers who are widely known around the state, and they're called the Traveling Symphony. And they travel in a big circle doing productions of Shakespeare for other people who have settled in this new normal, which is to say, people have society has broken down, so there's no electricity. People who have been born after the pandemic are called, I think, pre-pandies or something like that, or post-pandies. They don't know how telephones work. They don't know what an iPhone is. They don't understand Uber. They don't understand any of that kind of stuff. So again, on
does it hit too close to home?
That's why it was shocking. That's why it was so terrifying, is that it hits really close to home. It's incredibly close to home. And that's why I was like, oh, this could be good. And then you find out over the course of the series, that everyone, as you would expect in this miniseries, this is kind of like how it's a little bit like Nine Perfect Strangers. Everyone is connected some way.
Yeah.
There's a cult in the future. The cult wants to kidnap people, and they want to do this and they want to do that. It's really, I know I'm doing a very poor job of describing Station 11. It's very hard for me to accurately describe it, because if you just saw the first 2 episodes of the show, you would think it's about one thing. But then if you watch the rest of the series, you realize it's not about that one thing at all.
From what you described in the future, forget the traveling mimes and stuff. Is this kind of like Walking Dead, where it's no longer about, like, Walking Dead's not about the zombies, it's about the people and the drama.
Yes.
Is this the same thing? It's just a drama, and the pandemic's kind of the impetus for that.
It kind of is. And then you learn, I don't even want to say you learn, because I don't want to spoil it, like, in the sense that if you watch it, all I'll say is that the first 2 episodes are not indicative of the entire series. And that's why I'm kind of glad I watched the entire series, which is, again, not normal for Streamer Skip.
It's one season, or you watched?
One season, 8 episodes. It's a relatively quick watch. I would say that if you're in the mood for a drama, if you're in the mood for something where you don't really have to invest more time than these 8 episodes and that's it, this is quite possibly the show for you. And honestly, the start of the show is quite possibly the strongest start to anything we've seen on Streamer Skip. I would say that's very bold statement. Rivals The Tourist.
So just to watch the first 2 episodes and then put it aside.
If you watch the first 2 episodes, you will say, my God, I need to watch the rest of the show pronto. And then when you watch the rest of the show, you realize that the first 2 shows aren't indicative. And that's not a bad thing, by the way. Because the first 2 episodes really do a good job of setting up the rest of the series. The comic book, which is in the show, is called Station 11. And that comic book is it's like the MacGuffin of the show. A cult is created around that comic book. It's so hard for me to describe more of the show without spoiling it. I don't want to spoil it in the sense that the drama itself is quite good. The interpersonal relationships is quite good. I have given this a mooch only because the start is so strong, it kind of fizzles towards the end, which is what I said about the same thing I said for Nine Perfect Strangers and the same thing I said for Pieces of Her.
Oh, yeah, Pieces of Her.
It reminds me a little of that, which is when you first start it, there's a lot of potential for greatness throughout the series.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that it's not great. It is good, but I think the first 2 episodes are so good that everything else seems kind of like a bit of a downer thereafter. Does that make sense?
It does.
So, which is why I went from a must subscribe And then I said, because after I watched the first 2 episodes, I wrote my mini review. I said, oh, this is must subscribe. And then I sat down and watched over the course of the week, and I was like, oh, this is one of the few times where I have to go back and revise that rating.
But Pete, so I get it. Episodes 1 and 2, which are mandatory for streamer skip, you watch, you're like, this is amazing. Episode 3 was a little bit of a letdown for you. Episode 4 was a letdown. Like, what's your mindset after the 4th episode? You're like, well, I'm halfway in, I'll finish it, or it's got to capture that magic again?
No, not that. It wasn't. So when I say a letdown, I don't mean to say that it was bad. I'm just saying that it was pretty okay. Yeah. And the mystery of what's going on is still prevalent, but it's nowhere near as, I think it was because it starts off with a pandemic. It starts off with not an action sequence, but just a lot of drama and a lot of tension that we've all experienced in the last 3 years, where as you said, it hits a little close to home. So you're just like, oh, I have to see where this goes. My God, this could have been us had things gone badly. Yeah. That's all I'm saying. It's not that it's bad. I think that you want to continue watching it because you want to understand how the comic book plays into this. You want to understand how the series ends. So I'm not watching it because I was disappointed or hoping that it would go back up. I'm watching it because, all else being equal, it's actually not bad. It's just not stop everything, which is why I didn't email you or message you or call you and say, Ethan, you have to watch this right now.
Is this the best thing on HBO Max right now?
Oh, no, definitely not. It is a very good show, but there are other shows on HBO Max that are far better.
Pennyworth,
Game of Thrones,
Tourist.
House of Dragons, The Tourist. There's so
many. We've seen all those things though, right? I mean, like, I agree. Like, we saw Carnival Row, The Tourist,
the Industry,
White Lotus,
Minx,
Euphoria. Yeah. Okay.
So there's a lot. I'm not saying that it's a bad show at all. By no means am I saying it's a bad show. I'm just saying that with some of the shows that we've already watched, and with potentially some of the shows that are still on our stream or skip lists, I would say that if you're in for a quiet weekend and all you want to do is watch TV, and you want to watch a pretty decent TV series and know that after you watch these 8 episodes, you're done with it, this is it. This is the one that I think you'll enjoy watching.
So is there a conclusion? Is there a conclusion at the end of the 8th episode?
There is, yes.
Okay. I mean, I think that's the benefit for everyone as well, because you said it like, look, there's weekends where you're shut in or days you're shut in. You're like, hey, I want to start something. And it's tough when you're like, hey, I've got 4 seasons ahead of me. You know, like, I'm never going to have finality. I'm never going to have conclusion. It's going to sometimes, just like, 9 Perfect Strangers, you're like, look, I don't want a movie that's an hour and a half, but I'm definitely not looking for 5 seasons where I'm never going to know what the ending is, because after this weekend, I'm not going to be able to watch this, for another couple months.
Exactly.
There's something comforting about, just like Andor in a way, right? It wraps up pretty well,
Yeah.
There's more to come, but you can finish it and be like, all right, I feel accomplished. Nothing left unanswered.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where you're just like, I want to read a book this weekend, but I don't want to read a book. This is it. This is a good way to do it.
Nice.
So
okay.
I'm purposefully leaving it vague, unlike some of my other streamer skip reviews, but generally speaking, I'm doing that because I think that even though this
Public
is
service.
a mooch, and even for you, even if this is just a mooch, in my opinion, I think that there's still a lot of great value to be had from this TV series.
I'm in on the first 2 episodes. I'm going to watch the first 2 episodes for sure.
I agree. I think you should. And I think that will then set you up to decide if that's what you want to watch going forward.
Yep.
And also just say that, okay, well, I've finished my work for the week, or it's Christmas time. Everyone's off the next couple of weeks. I've got nothing better to do. I'm flying back home. I've got a 12-hour flight ahead of me. Let me download Station 11 on my iPad or on my laptop, and I can sit and watch it on a flight.
Yeah. You're right. Speaking of Christmas shows, we should watch that Ryan Reynolds, Will Ferrell movie.
Spirited?
Yes.
I saw it and I passed.
No way! You give it a
I gave it
a skip?
a hard skip.
A hard skip?
The hardest of hard skips I could possibly give a TV show.
Hold on. Do you mean...
It's already on our list.
Do you mean that you gave it Warrior Nun rating?
I gave it the same rating as Jurassic World Dominion.
Oh my gosh. Didn't Ryan Reynolds do his Ryan Reynolds snarky things?
He did.
And what's wrong with Will Ferrell? He's just like...
He did his Will Ferrell things.
Not funny? Not funny.
It did nothing for me. Absolutely nothing for me.
Ouch. Ouch. Ouch.
But that's me. That's me. How about you? How was The Man in the High Castle this week?
Listeners, I was assigned The Man in the High Castle, which apart from having the longest title of any assignment we've had, was very, very interesting to watch. I watched 5 episodes, and let me summarize in the words of Wikipedia that this is a dystopian alternate history television series. I understand it's 4 seasons. It started 2015, so it's actually a little bit aged, but it takes place in the 60s. So when you're watching it, you're not going to be like, wow, this is a 2015 show. It ages very well in that way. It's on Amazon Prime. And if you watch the opening, the opening sequence where they've got like some music, sometimes it's a song, and they show all the different credits. Mm-hmm. This lays out the summary very, very well on a map. It takes place immediately after World War II. Nazi Germany has apparently won the war, and it has occupied the East Coast, or the eastern part of the United States. And as a result, Japan has occupied the west part of the United States. And what is kind of like the Rocky Mountains is a neutral zone. So right away, without any scene, without any acting, immediately during these opening credits and the music and so forth, you kind of know exactly what is the general plot. Yeah, U.S. lost, or not just the U.S., the Allies lost World War II. Germany, Japan split up the U.S. So this is actually based on a novel. I didn't know that. The novel was written in 1962, which seems a little bit fresh to me, but apparently it was. So this all takes place in 1962. Maybe seasons 2, 3, 4 take place in a different era, but this season 1, or at least the first 4 or 5 episodes, are all in 1962. And you can tell because all the vehicles are very, very old, right? It's 1962 type stuff. So the East Coast is called the Greater Nazi Reich. The West Coast is called the Japanese Pacific States. And you're introduced to little dramas or machinations on each side. The capitals being New York and San Francisco, respectively. And Japan is afraid that Germany will attack them and take over, basically the Western states. So when I was reading about this, I read after I watched my first 4 or 5 episodes, and they talk a lot about how the Nazis are depicted as technologically superior, and the Japanese are not as advanced technologically, and they're a little bit more traditional. I did not really pick that up in the episode or in the series when I was watching it. So it's something that I guess was a little bit subtle. But now that I think back on it, maybe I can see it. But there's drama. Obviously, there's a resistance of what were formerly known as Americans. Obviously, on the East Coast, at least, there is an absence of tolerance of, people who are Jewish. The West Coast has kind of reversed things. Instead of what we knew as kind of the Japanese imprisonments, now they're, much more harsh towards the Americans. That is the summary. How do I feel about this? I gave it a mooch because it's done extraordinarily well. Amazon obviously spent a good amount of money on it. The script, the actors are superb. Everything was done from a production perspective very, very well. The subject matter is really a downer. And I'm sure that in whatever boardroom Amazon had to debate whether or not this should be greenlit, they had that conversation a lot. It's a downer, not because I'm an American, not for any other reason, that it's just really negative to watch a show about an occupied country. And here you've basically got two occupations. So it's almost like twice as negative. You're watching how harsh the Japanese are towards the Americans on the West Coast. You're watching, how militant the Nazis are on the East Coast. And I have to say, if I were Japanese or German, I would really be offended by this show. I mean, this is an alternate history that depicts each of these cultures or people in the worst possible light. It's pretty revolting to watch. Yes, there's a resistance. And yes, even within the Japanese ranks, of course, there's some people who are trying to undermine this. Of course, in the Nazi ranks, there's some people who are trying to undermine this. I imagine that over the end of season 1, season 2, 3, 4, there's going to be a lot of very good drama. I imagine it's going to be quite compelling. But I have to say, even though it's done well, it's dark. And, we got Pete really involved or really compelled by another, alternate history show, and that was For All Mankind. But For All Mankind, I thought, was in a very positive way. It wasn't at all negative. And I have to say, I think the distinction between these two dystopian histories, The Man in the High Castle and For All Mankind, is that The Man in the High Castle is just kind of dark. It's not a show where you turn it off after watching an episode. You're like, oh, that was enjoyable. That was funny. That was fun. Oh, I really learned anything there. It brings you down. And I know that not all television, not all entertainment has to be fun and games. We're not just out there for cheap laughs and fart jokes. Otherwise Adam Sandler would have a monopoly on the market. But there's also something about using your free time to watch something that makes you unhappy or puts you in a worse mood. And I think that's really the one thing that this show, which is otherwise extraordinarily well done and thoughtful, has against it. I gave it a mooch. If you like dystopian histories, you will like this show. But overall, I just found the subject matter to be too dark, too negative. Again, just kind of bringing me down. And if I've got a limited amount of time in my life that I want to spend, on entertainment, I'm not really looking for a show that when I finish it 50 minutes later, I'm feeling worse and negative. I want something either uplifting, or if it's not going to be uplifting, I want it to be like really interesting, fascinating, thought-provoking, educational, something that just kind of like stimulates me. And I'm absolutely not getting it from this show.
Is it fair to say that it leaves you feeling the way The Handmaid's Tale left me feeling?
A little bit, yeah. I agree. And actually, as much as I love The Handmaid's Tale, and I think that's even a little bit more interesting, it's a very similar experience, which is you walk away and you're like, why is my mood bad now? Why am I somber? Why am I not jovial, right? And it's because the subject matter, you can't possibly, look at it in any respect that's positive or enjoyable, and I think that's really tough. And I would imagine that, again, at the Amazon headquarters, whenever they had to decide whether or not to greenlight the series, the pro side was, this is really, really unique. Everyone will, know about it. It'll be so interesting to people, and it's going to be done really, really well. And the con side was, no one wants to watch this show. You're not appealing to anybody. In fact, absolutely every German, every Japanese people will revolt against this show. You're not captivating anybody. The fact that it was on for 4 seasons on Amazon, I think, speaks to the fact of the quality. But again,
maybe also just the size of Amazon and their ability
and the size
to
of Amazon. I mean, it is based on a book, and I have to say, dystopian histories are interesting, and this one's a really good case study, right? I mean, but for me, it's really too dark. The torture, the way that they treat people, the everything. It's just, why am I watching this? And I can't say when I'm watching it, I want to turn it off, because it's good. Like, the characters are interesting. The situations are compelling. It's not dull. It's not boring. It doesn't lack for drama or adrenaline. It's just that the entire idea of it is too dark and too negative for me. I watched 4 and I kind of enjoyed the 4, I have to say. But again, I noticed that after each one, I was just kind of like dragging a little bit, and I needed something to bulk me up, because I'm really not interested in watching, Japanese people, interrogate and beat up, people in San Francisco. There's nothing good that comes from that for me, Production value, exceptional. Storyline, kind of a downer. If you're a history buff, you will like it. But overall, I have to say that this is a mooch. There's better things out there if you're looking for stimulation or uplifting. But if you're a really huge history buff, you'll probably get a kick out of this one.
Okay, so 2 mooches this week.
2 mooches this week.
Again, not because they're bad shows, just because that's
there's a high bar. I mean, there's a high bar for putting your money down and subscribing for something, right? Not everything can be a subscribe. So I think our curve that we're grading on is quite accurate and realistic, right?
Yeah.
Tell me, Pete, the virtual die has been cast. I know that you've chosen what we're going to assign each other for next week. What is it?
Indeed. So for next week, my friend, you will be watching Dickinson.
I can't wait. It's the lady from, I think it's Haley Steinfeld.
You're absolutely right. It is Haley Steinfeld.
I have no idea what it's about. I mean, from Dickinson, I assume it's Emily Dickinson, who
it
even
must be, right?
Historically, I couldn't write more than 2 sentences about who is Emily Dickinson, but I'm pretty stoked to watch this. I've heard it's quite decent. What do you have?
I will be watching Gunpowder on HBO Max.
Oh, 1-word shows. What's Gunpowder about?
No clue. I haven't even heard of this. I've never even seen this on my queue on HBO Max, so I don't know what
I have to say, neither have I. Let's see where we get with Dickinson.
And with Gunpowder. Look, we both always hope for the best.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there.
Listeners, thank you. Don't forget to send your comments.
Drop us a line, comment below this video. You can drop us a line on Twitter at F&S Podcast, or you can drop us a DM on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast, or you can email us aloha at filmsandstuffpodcast.com.
Pete, thank you for another great episode. I wish you an enjoyable viewing of Gunpowder, whatever that may be.
Thank you, Ethan. I'm looking forward to hearing about Dickinson.
Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely day ahead.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.